Welcome to webisode 6 entitled 9 Ether of our Science or Creation series according to African cosmology. In physics, coherent radiation is defined as the orderly emission of energy from a source. Radiation is considered coherent when it does not diverge and the frequency phase difference is constant. Coherent radiation enables the transmission of frequencies with low levels of loss. Just like coherent radiation permits frequencies to be transmitted with very little loss, in order for information to be comprehended, it must be transmitted coherently or orderly. This webisode deals with the concept of ether, which is the ancient concept whose information has become lost in transmission from the past to the present, but has practical implications and applications in modern theology, theory, and technology. In the realm of spirituality, the concept of ether holds great significance. This webisode seeks to explore what ether is and its existence in both spiritual and scientific contexts. The subject materials within this body of work, though readily available with a quick internet search, are underpinned coherently by excerpts of highly recommended source material produced by the African Creation Energy series of books. They are pushing for not only the ancient sciences to be understood by the descendants of the Tamarean global spanning civilization, but also the application of their knowledge in the subjects of STEM, being science, technology, engineering, and maths. Since time immemorial, humanity has acknowledged the existence of a fundamental and quintessential element and energy that permeates the totality of nature. While the names, labels, stories, details, and explanations regarding this quintessential substance has changed over time, the concept has been present and prevalent in the variety of different cultural expressions, philosophies, theologies, ideologies, religions, theories, and sciences throughout history. In the English language, the quintessential substance is called ether. The word ether is also related to the Greek word atheo, meaning to incinerate and burn, which is found in the word Ethiopian or Ethiopian, meaning ether people, which is a name the Greeks once used for all carbon organic tribes, families, and clans referred to as Africans. In ancient alchemy, ether was conceptualized as the fifth element, after the four elements of earth, air, fire, and water. The word quintessential, which means the essential essence of something, actually breaks down etymologically as quint meaning fifth and essential meaning element, rendering the alchemical term fifth element, which signifies the fundamental importance attributed to ether. In Greek mythology, ether was personified as a primordial elemental god, representing light in the upper air and upper atmosphere, above the terrestrial sphere where the gods lived and breathed. The personification of ether in Greek mythology was actually predated by ancient African concepts, cosmologies, and cosmogonies, which personified for concepts related to ether through various anthropomorphic deities in ancient Egypt. The primordial gods, called the Ogdoad or Kemenu, represented the concepts of nothingness, chaos, void, darkness, infinity, eternity, hidden and invisible qualities in nature. In Egyptian mythology, the Ogdoad or Kemenu gave birth to the 9 Ennead or Sejet, which includes deities that personified concepts related to ether, including Atom or Re being energy or light and Nut being sky, as well as deities, which personified the other 4 alchemical elements, including Shu being air, Tefnut being water, Gib being earth, and Sudak being fire. Just as the ancient Egyptians personified the various energies, elements, and concepts related to ether, we find similar examples of this practice over time throughout Africa, amongst the Yoruba people in present-day Nigeria. The word Ashi is used to refer to the ethereal power and energy which causes all event and happenings. The various forms of ash or ether are personified in the pantheon of Orisha deities. The word Orisha breaks down to Ori, meaning head, ruler, or master, and Isha meaning ash, meaning energy or ether, and thus the word Orisha literally means rulers or masters of ether. Interestingly enough, the Yoruba religion is known as Ifa, spelt I-F-A. Ifa is a divination system originating from Yoruba land in West Africa. It originates within the traditional religion of the Yoruba people, although is also practiced by followers of West African Vodun and in African diasporic religions like Cuban Santeria. According to Ifa teaching, the divinatory system is overseen by an Orisha spirit, Orunmila, who is believed to have given it to humanity. The deities of the Akan people in Ghana are another example of the personification of the concepts related to ether in Africa. Some of the names for the personifications of ether in the Akan culture include Nyam, the sky deity whose right eye is said to be the sun and whose left eye is said to be the moon. We discussed this in depth within our second webisode entitled The Science of Creation According to African Cosmologies. Variations of the Akan aspects of ether called Nyama is also acknowledged by the Min people in West Africa, who call it Nyama, and the Dogon people of West Africa, who call it Ama. In the Akan culture, Nyam is said to be the father of Anansi, the spider who spins the web of energy ether that exists throughout all of existence. The Akan people of West Africa also acknowledge what they call the Abosom, which are various aspects of ether energy that can be contained within assorted persons, places, or things. There are many other examples of ether and the deification of the concepts related to ether that can be found around the world. The alchemical systems of the Chinese, Japanese, and Tibetan culture all acknowledge ether, as we will explore. In Hinduism, ether was called Akasha and referred to space, the cosmos, or the sky. Ether, often referred to as the subtlest spiritual substance, is believed to be the spiritual fabric in whom we live, move, and have our being. It is considered to be the underlying energetic essence that permeates all of existence. According to esoteric studies, ether is seen as the substance from which all forms and manifestations can be created. In spiritual teachings, ether is often associated with the infinite and formless aspect of the divine. It is regarded as a medium through which consciousness and energy can flow, connecting all beings and aspects of creation. Ether is considered to be a conduit for spiritual forces and vibrations. The concept of ether has also been a subject of scientific inquiry, although its existence remains a topic of debate. In the early 20th century, ether was proposed as a medium for transmitting light and electromagnetic waves. However, subsequent experiments and the development of the theory of relativity led to a shift in scientific understanding. The scientific community is divided on the existence of ether. Some scientists assert its existence, believing that space is filled with energies that could transform the Earth if harnessed. Others deny its existence, although both parties may essentially mean the same thing but use different terminology. It is important to note that in the realm of spirituality, physical dimensions or constraints do not limit ether. It is regarded as a spiritual substance that is governed and sustained by ideas, consciousness, and the creative power of the divine. This distinction sets it apart from scientific conceptions of matter and energy. Understanding ether in spirituality requires embracing the idea of a subtle, formless essence that connects all aspects of existence. Its existence is seen as a conduit for spiritual forces and the creative power of consciousness. While the scientific debate continues, exploring the spiritual significance of ether offers insights into the interconnectedness of all things. Let's explore how ether is understood in Ayurveda and Sanskrit, as well as its representation as the fifth element. Ether, also known as Akasha in Sanskrit, refers to space or emptiness. In Ayurveda, it is considered the fifth element and is associated with the spiritual aspect of existence. This concept emphasizes that ether is both nothing and everything simultaneously, making movement and life possible. It symbolizes the essence of emptiness and represents the subtlest of all the elements. In Ayurvedic practices, ether is seen as the element that allows consciousness to manifest and permeate the physical body. The term Ayurveda is composed of two words, Ayus, meaning life or longevity, and Veda meaning knowledge, translated as knowledge of longevity or knowledge of life and longevity. Ayurveda is an alternative medicine system with historical roots in the Indian subcontinent. Ayurveda therapies have varied and evolved over more than 2 millennia. Therapies include herbal medicines, special diets, meditation, yoga, massage, laxatives, enemas, and medical oils. Ayurvedic preparations are typically based on complex herbal compounds, minerals, and metal substances, perhaps under the influence of early Indian alchemy or Rasashastra. Ancient Ayurveda texts also taught surgical techniques, including rhinoplasty, lithotomy, sutures, cataract surgery, and the extraction of foreign objects. Historical evidence for Ayurvedic texts, terminology, and concepts appears from the middle of the first millennium BCE onwards. The main classical Ayurveda texts begin with accounts of the transmission of medical knowledge from the gods to sages, and then to human physicians. The ether is believed to influence our ability to connect with higher realms and tap into our intuitive wisdom. By nurturing the ether element, one can enhance their spiritual connection and achieve a deeper understanding of oneself and the world. Ether, or Akasha, is recognized as the first element in yogic and Ayurvedic philosophy. It represents space and is fundamental to the understanding of the other four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Ether is the element from which all other elements arise, and it is the container that holds them all together. It provides the canvas on which the dance of life unfolds. The qualities of ether are unique and distinct. It is the subtlest of all the elements, devoid of the firmness of earth, the coolness of water, the heat of fire, or the movement of wind. Ether represents the essence of emptiness, providing a sense of expansion and possibility. It is through the presence of ether that the other elements find their expression and purpose. The being of ether is governed and sustained by ideas, which have no physical dimensions. It exists beyond the limitations of matter and serves as a conduit for the manifestation of thoughts and intentions. This subtle quality of ether invites us to explore the infinite nature of our consciousness and tap into our creative potential. Ether as the container of elements. In spiritual teachings, ether is considered the container for all the other elements. It is the space in which the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind exist and interact. Just as a container holds various objects, ether holds the essence and energy of these elements. It provides a platform for their expression and harmonious coexistence. The concept of ether as the container of elements is associated with the throat chakra, which governs communication and self-expression. The throat chakra acts as a bridge between the inner and outer worlds, allowing us to express our thoughts, ideas, and emotions. When the throat chakra is balanced, it enables clear and authentic communication, both with others and ourselves. The Archive of Nations Science of Creation series will deep dive into kawkabs referred to as chakras in upcoming webisodes. By understanding the subtlety and emptiness of ether, we can tap into its transformative power. It invites us to explore the depths of our consciousness, embrace our creative potential, and foster authentic communication. Incorporating the qualities of ether in our spiritual practices can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and our connection to the world around us. The classical elements of earth, fire, air, water, and ether have been central to a variety of cosmologies across cultures. As seen in the ancient indigenous carbon organic cultures such as the African, Eastern, Oriental, Indian, and other indigenous peoples' cosmologies, these elements carry significant philosophical and symbolic meanings, shaping our understanding of the natural world and our place within it. Further exploration into the cultural and historical contexts of these elements can provide deeper insight into the rich diversity of human thought and the intricate ways in which we interpret and interact with the world around us. In many carbon organic African cosmologies, the elements of earth, fire, air, and water are regarded as fundamental aspects of life in the universe, often associated with various deities, spiritual entities, or ancestral spirits. However, it's important to note that Africa is a vast continent with hundreds of distinct cultures, languages, and traditions, so there's no singular African perspective on these elements. Different societies interpret and incorporate these elements in their cosmologies in unique ways. Here is a broad overview. 1. Earth. In many African cosmologies, the earth is often seen as a mother figure, a giver and sustainer of life. It is the physical realm where humans live, and it is a source of nourishment, healing, and wisdom. Earth is also often associated with ancestors who are believed to dwell in the ground after death. Practices like libations are common, where liquid, often water or alcohol, is poured on the ground in honor of the ancestors. The Archive of Nations will explore the relationship between soil and soul in later webisodes. 2. Fire is commonly associated with transformation, purification, and the spirit world in many African traditions. It can also represent life energy or vital force. Fire often has dualistic aspects. It can be destructive, but it can also provide warmth and light. In some cultures, fire is used in rituals and ceremonies, serving as a medium for communication with the spirit world. 3. Air is often symbolically linked to breath and life, and by extension, to the spirit or soul in several African cosmologies. Air, wind, and the sky can be considered the realm of spirits, gods, or ancestors. This element might also be associated with communication, wisdom, and knowledge, as it can carry voices and messages across vast distances. 4. Water is seen as a source of life, cleansing, and healing in many African cultures. It's necessary for survival and growth, both physically and spiritually. Water is often used in ritual purification and is seen as a link between the realms of the living and the dead. In some cultures, rivers, lakes, and seas are believed to be home to various spirits and deities. Again, this is a broad overview, and specific beliefs and practices can vary widely among different African cultures and traditions. Also, some African cosmologies might incorporate additional elements or concepts, such as metal, wood, or the concept of ether or spirit, which serves as the unifying force of all the other elements. Other indigenous peoples' cosmologies include the elements earth, fire, air, and water, which are central to many indigenous cosmologies around the world. While each indigenous culture interprets these elements in unique ways, they often share a respect for the interconnectedness of all things, including the elements. In the many carbon organic indigenous cultures in North America, the elements are deeply respected and considered to hold spiritual significance. For instance, the Navajo people regard the elements as sacred elements of life. In their cosmology, the 4 elements are associated with the 4 cardinal directions, each having spiritual and symbolic meanings. Fire, for instance, is often associated with the south, signifying warmth and growth. Among the many indigenous peoples in South America, elements are seen as part of a larger, interconnected web of life. The Quechua peoples of the Andes, for example, see the elements as crucial components of their world. Fire, or Nina in Quechuan, is not just a physical phenomenon, but also a symbol of transformative energy. Further south in Central America, the original indigenous carbon organic Maya peoples held the elements in high regard. For instance, the element of water was associated with Chak, the Maya god of rain. Air, represented by the wind god, Kukulkan, was seen as a divine force. Earth was believed to be a fertile goddess, and fire was associated with the sun god, Kinechahau. Across the globe, the Aboriginal Australians have a strong connection with the land, which they see as their mother, the provider of life. Water is also essential, represented in the rainbow serpent, a powerful being that shaped the land and water bodies. Fire is seen as a transformative force and is often used in ceremonies and for land management. Air, particularly wind, is seen as a communicator of messages and a guide. In the Maori culture of New Zealand, the elements are part of a complex network of gods and spiritual entities. Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, and Tangaroa, the god of the sea, embody earth and water respectively. Tawira, the god of weather and storms, personifies air and fire, is associated with the deity of volcanic activities and geothermal fire, Ahituroa. In many Pacific Island cultures, the elements are integral to life and belief systems. In Hawaiian cosmology, for instance, Pele, the volcano goddess, embodies fire. The god Kanaloa embodies the sea, a crucial element for the islanders. Air, often associated with breath or ha, is seen as the force of life, and earth is viewed as the foundation and source of all life. In Japan, this concept is known as the Godai, which is often translated as the 5 great elements. In Tibetan cosmology, the 5 elements, earth, fire, air, water, and ether, are fundamental aspects of the universe. These elements play a significant role in various aspects of Tibetan philosophy, spirituality, and healing practices. In Tibetan cosmology, these elements are not seen as separate entities, but rather as interconnected and interdependent aspects of existence. They are believed to be present in every living being and in the natural world. Tibetan healing practices, such as Tibetan medicine and certain forms of meditation, aim to balance these elements within the body and mind to promote well-being and spiritual growth. It's important to note that the understanding and interpretation of these elements can vary across different Tibetan Buddhist traditions and teachings. The 5 elements are also found in other cultural and spiritual systems, each with its unique symbolism and significance. In Indian cosmology, particularly in Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist philosophies, the world is often understood as being composed of 5 basic elements, or Panchamahabhutas: earth, Prithvi, water, Jala, fire, Agni, air, Vayu, and ether, or space, Akasha. These elements are not just physical substances, but spiritual essences, making them fundamental to both the material and spiritual realms. In all these cultures, the elements are seen not just as physical aspects of the world, but as integral parts of a holistic cosmology where humans, nature, and the spiritual realm are interconnected. It's also worth mentioning that the views and beliefs within each region can greatly vary, and this is only a generalized overview. Throughout history, the concept of ether has captivated the minds of many, including medieval alchemists and ancient civilizations. Let's delve into their perspectives to gain a deeper understanding of the mysteries surrounding ether before we correlate ether with the latest scientific discoveries in the realm of quantum physics. Medieval alchemists were fascinated by the transformative properties attributed to the ether element. They believed that ether possessed the power to transmute base metals into gold and even prolong life. In their pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance capable of such alchemical transformations, they referred to ether as quintessence. This term was also used to describe celestial bodies like stars and galaxies, reflecting the ethereal nature they associated with ether. The Philosopher's Stone is a mythic alchemical substance capable of turning base metals such as mercury into gold or silver. It was also known as the tincture and the powder. Alchemists additionally believed that it could be used to make an elixir of life, which made possible rejuvenation and immortality. For many centuries, it was the most sought-after goal in alchemy. The Philosopher's Stone was the central symbol of the mystical terminology of alchemy, symbolizing perfection at its finest, divine illumination, and heavenly bliss. Efforts to discover the Philosopher's Stone were known as the Magnus Opus-Great Work. In alchemy, the Magnus Opus or Great Work is a term for the process of working with the prima materia to create the Philosopher's Stone. It has been used to describe personal and spiritual transmutation in the Hermetic tradition, attached to laboratory processes and chemical color changes, used as a model for the individuation process, and as a device in art and literature. The Magnum Opus has been carried forward in New Age and Neo-Hermetic movements, which sometimes attached new symbolism and significance to the processes. The original process philosophy has 4 stages: 1. Nigredo, the blackening or melanosis; rubedo, the reddening, purpling, or iosis citrinitas, the yellowing or xanthosis; and finally albedo, the whitening or leucosis. The origin of these 4 phases can be traced at least as far back as the 1st century. The development of black, white, yellow, and red can also be found in the Physica Chemistica of Pseudo-Democritus, which is often considered to be one of the oldest books on alchemy. After the 15th century, many writers tended to compress citrinitas into rubedo and consider only 3 stages. You will notice this alchemitic process also relates to the degeneration of ether from the nigredo or the melanosis/blackening process to albedo or albino, known as whitening or leucosis, which corresponds with the bleaching of the races, which was near completion during the time referred to as medieval, but began thousands of years earlier, as we show within the other series presented by the Archive of Nations. In alchemy, nigredo, or blackness, means putrefaction or decomposition. Many alchemists believed that as a first step in the pathway to the Philosopher's Stone, all alchemical ingredients had to be cleansed and cooked extensively to a uniform black matter. In analytical psychology, the term became a metaphor for the dark night of the soul, when an individual confronts the shadow within. The dark night of the soul, la noche oscura del alma, is a phase of passive purification of the spirit in the mystical development, as described by the 16th century Spanish mystic and poet St. John of the Cross in his treatise Dark Night, Noche Oscura, a commentary on his poem with the same name. It follows after the second phase, the illumination in which God's presence is felt, but this presence is not yet stable. The author himself did not give any title to his poem, which together with this commentary and the ascent of Mount Carmel, Subida del Monte Carmelo, forms a treatise on the active and passive purification of the senses and the spirit, leading to mystical union. In modern terms, this is referred to as shadow work. Shadow is a critical psychological insight from the work of psychiatrist Carl Jung. The shadow is the dark side of our personality because it consists chiefly of primitive, negative human emotions and impulses like rage, envy, greed, selfishness, desire, and the striving for power. Everything we deny in ourselves, whatever we perceive as inferior, evil, or unacceptable, becomes part of the shadow. Anything incompatible with our chosen conscious attitude about ourselves relegates to this dark side. The shadow archetype is the disowned self, and this shadow self represents the parts of us we no longer claim to be our own, including both inherent negative and positive qualities. Whatever we disown gets relegated to our unconscious. Jung found that the psyche is comprised of both conscious and unconscious material. This psychic material includes thoughts, feelings, images, attitudes, motivations, judgments, and impulses. Conscious material is the stuff we know about ourselves. Unconscious material is all of the stuff we don't know. Generally, there's far more unconscious material hiding from us, much like the etheric realm and what is referred to as dark matter, which we will explore in the next webisode. The earliest known written mention of the Philosopher's Stone is about 4,000 years ago in an ancient stone carving, then again in the Chirogmata by Zosimos of Panopolis, 300 AD. Alchemical writers assign a longer history. Elias Ashmole and the anonymous author of Gloria Mundi, 1620, claim that its history goes back to the graftation of Adam 6,000 years ago, who acquired the knowledge of the stone directly from God. This knowledge was said to have been passed down through biblical patriarchs, giving them their longevity. We will cover this in our webisode entitled Revealed Genetics, or the Revelations of the Genes of Isis. The theoretical roots outlining the stone's creation can be traced to Greek philosophy. Alchemists later used the classical elements, the concept of Annu Mundi, and creation stories presented in texts like Plato's Timaeus as analogies for their process. The concept of the Annu Mundi, world soul, or soul of the world, posits an intrinsic connection between all living beings, suggesting that the world is animated by a soul much like the human body. Rooted in ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, the idea holds that the world soul infuses the cosmos with life and intelligence. This notion has been influential across various systems of thought, including Stoicism, Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and Hermeticism, shaping metaphysical and cosmological frameworks throughout history. In ancient philosophy, Plato's dialogue Timaeus introduces the universe as a living creature endowed with a soul and reason, constructed by the demiurge according to a rational pattern expressed through mathematical principles. Plato describes the world soul as a mixture of sameness and difference, forming a unified, harmonious entity that permeates the cosmos. This soul animates the universe, ensuring its rational structure and function according to a divine plan, with the motions of the 7 classical planets reflecting the deep connection between mathematics and reality in Platonic thought. Stoicism and Gnosticism are 2 significant philosophical systems that elaborated on this concept. Stoicism, founded by Zeno of Citium in the early 3rd century BCE, posited that the universe is a single, living entity permeated by the divine rational principle known as the Logos, which organizes and animates the cosmos, functioning as its soul. Gnosticism, emerging in the early centuries of the Common Era, often associates the world soul with Sophia, who embodies divine wisdom and the descent into the material world. Gnostics believed that esoteric knowledge could transcend the material world and reunite with the divine. Gnosticism, a diverse and syncretic religious movement that emerged in the early centuries of the Common Era, also incorporated the concept of the world soul into its cosmological and theological framework. Gnostic systems generally posited a dualistic worldview, contrasting the material world with a higher, spiritual reality. In this context, the world soul often played a crucial role in bridging the divine and material realms. In Gnostic thought, the world soul is often associated with the figure of Sophia, wisdom, who embodies both the divine wisdom and the tragic descent into the material world. Sophia's fall and subsequent redemption are central themes in many Gnostic texts. According to the Apocryphon of John, a key Gnostic scripture, Sophia's emanation resulted in the creation of the material world, which is seen as flawed and distant from the divine. In Gnostic systems, the concept of the world soul often carries significant ethical and soteriological implications. Gnostics believed that by acquiring esoteric knowledge and understanding their divine origin, individuals could transcend the material world and reunite with the divine. According to Plato, the four elements are derived from a common source or prima materia, first matter, associated with chaos. Prima materia is also the name alchemists assigned to the starting ingredient for the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The importance of this philosophical first matter persisted throughout the history of alchemy. In the 17th century, Thomas Vaughan writes, "The first matter of the stone is the very same with the first matter of all things." In ancient Greek philosophy, ether held a special place as a godlike element connecting humans to spirituality and intuition. It was considered a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms, allowing individuals to access higher states of consciousness. The ancient Greeks regarded ether as a source of divine inspiration and insight, attributing mystical qualities to this elusive element. In Greek mythology, ether is the personification of the bright upper sky. According to Hesiod, he was the son of Erebus, darkness, and Nyx, night, and the brother of Hemera, day, and Orphic cosmogony ether was the offspring of Kronos, time, and the brother of Chaos and Erebus. Ether also played a role in Roman genealogies of the gods. Cicero says that Ether and Dis, day, were the parents of Salus, sky. Ether played a significant role in Orphic cosmogony. There are a large number of ancient texts which have been called Orphic. A few are extant, such as the Orphic hymns, but most are not. Several important Orphic texts, which exist now only in fragments, have been called theogonies since they contain material similar to Hesiod's theogony, which described the origin of the gods. This is what Orpheus stated. He said that at the beginning Aether was revealed to time, having been created by God, and there was chaos on this side of Aether, and on that, while dark night held everything and covered what was under Aether, signifying that night came first. Orpheus said in his account that there was a certain being who was incomprehensible, supreme over all, before all, and the creator of all things, including the Aether itself and night and the whole creation that was concealed and was beneath the Aether. He said that the earth was invisible beneath the darkness. He declared that light broke through the Aether and illuminated the earth and all creation, saying that the light which broke through the Aether was that being mentioned above, that was supreme over all things, whose name Orpheus heard from the oracle and declared, Metis, Fans, Erikapeos. According to ancient and medieval science, ether alternative spellings include ether, Aether, and ether, also known as the fifth element or quintessence, and is the material that fills the region of the universe beyond the terrestrial sphere. The concept of ether was used in several theories to explain several natural phenomena, such as the propagation of light and gravity. Early mathematicians equated each fundamental alchemical element with a different geometric shape, such that the cube represents earth, the icosahedron represented water, the octahedron represented air, the tetrahedron represented fire, and the dodecahedron represented ether. To most early modern scientists, ether was acknowledged as a medium field or substance which filled space and matter and was necessary for the transmission and propagation of light. This light-bearing ether was called luminiferous ether. In the 1800s, various scientists tried to prove the existence of ether experimentally, and they were unsuccessful. By the early 1900s, Albert Einstein's theories of relativity convinced most scientists at the time that ether was completely imaginary and did not exist. However, the death of the early scientific concepts related to ether gave rise and rebirth to new, modern scientific concepts, which echoed the concepts related to ether of the past, as we will see. Albert Einstein's theories, which suggested that space was some type of medium, actually introduced what is called relativistic ether and Einstein ether theory. In the late 19th century, physicists postulated that ether permeated space, providing a medium through which light could travel in a vacuum. But evidence for the presence of such a medium was not found in the Michelson-Morley experiment, and this result has been interpreted to mean that no luminiferous ether exists. The word aether in Homeric Greek means pure, fresh air, or clear sky. In Greek mythology, it was thought to be the pure essence that the gods breathed, filling the space where they lived, analogous to the air breathed by mortals. A very interesting fact is that the word ether is related to the word to incinerate, and intransitive to burn. To shine, which is related, is the name Ethiops or Ethiopians, see Ethiopia, meaning people with a burnt, black visage. This will tie in with our next webisode, Melanin, a universal gift from the gods exclusive to the Archive of Nations. Ether was used in one of Sir Isaac Newton's first published theories of gravitation, Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, the Principia, 1687. He based the whole description of planetary motions on a theoretical law of dynamic interactions. He renounced standing attempts at accounting for this particular form of interaction between distant bodies by introducing a mechanism of propagation through an intervening medium. He calls this intervening medium ether. In his ether model, Newton describes ether as a medium that flows continually downward toward the Earth's surface and is partially absorbed and partially diffused. This circulation of ether is what he associated the force of gravity with to help explain the action of gravity in a non-mechanical fashion. Newton also explained this changing rarity and density of ether in his letter to Robert Boyle in 1679. Robert Boyle was a proponent of an ether hypothesis. According to Boyle, the ether consists of subtle particles, one sort of which explains the absence of vacuum and the mechanical interactions between bodies, and the other sort of which explains phenomena such as magnetism and possibly gravity that are, otherwise, inexplicable on the basis of purely mechanical interactions of macroscopic bodies. Though in the ether of the ancients there was nothing taken notice of but a diffused and very subtle substance, yet we are at present content to allow that there is always in the air a swarm of streams moving in a determinate course between the North Pole and the South. Isaac Newton illustrated to Robert Boyle ether and its field around objects in this letter as well, and used this as a way to inform Robert Boyle about his theory. Although Newton eventually changed his theory of gravitation to one involving force and the laws of motion, his starting point for the modern understanding and explanation of gravity came from his original ether model on gravitation. Isaac Newton suggests the existence of an ether in the Third Book of Optics, first edition 1704, second edition 1718. Doth not this ethereal medium in passing out of water, glass, crystal, and other compact and dense bodies in empty spaces, grow denser by degrees, and by that means refract the rays of light not in a point, but by bending them gradually in curved lines? Is not this medium much rarer within the dense bodies of the sun, stars, planets, and comets than in the empty celestial space between them? And in passing from them to great distances, doth it not grow denser and denser perpetually, and thereby cause the gravity of those great bodies towards one another, and of their parts towards the bodies, every body endeavoring to go from the denser parts of the medium towards the rarer? In contrast to the modern understanding that heat radiation and light are both electromagnetic radiation, Newton viewed heat and light as two different phenomena. He believed heat vibrations to be excited when a ray of light falls upon the surface of any pellucid body. He wrote, "I do not know what this ether is, but that if it consists of particles then they must be." From the 16th until the late 19th century, gravitational effects had also been modeled using an ether. In the 19th century, luminiferous ether, or ether, meaning light-bearing ether, was a theorized medium for the propagation of light. James Clerk Maxwell developed a model to explain electric and magnetic phenomena using the ether, a model that led to what are now called Maxwell's equations and the understanding that light is an electromagnetic wave. Later, a series of increasingly careful experiments were carried out in the late 1800s, including the Michelson-Morley experiment, to try to detect the motion of Earth through the ether, but no drag was detected. In a note at the end of his work, A Dynamical Theory of the Electromagnetic Field, Maxwell discussed a model for gravity based on a medium similar to the one he used for the electromagnetic field. He concluded that the medium would have an enormous intrinsic energy and would necessarily have to be diminished in areas of mass. He could not understand in what way a medium can possess such properties, so he did not pursue it further. None of those concepts are considered to be viable by the scientific community today. Albert Einstein sometimes used the word ether for the gravitational field within general relativity, but the only similarity of this relativistic ether concept with the classical ether models lies in the presence of physical properties in space, which can be identified through geodesics. Ether has been used in various gravitational theories as a medium to help explain gravitation and what causes it. As historians such as John Stahel argue, Einstein's views on the new ether are not in conflict with his abandonment of the ether in 1905. As Einstein himself pointed out, no substance and no state of motion can be attributed to that new ether. Einstein's use of the word ether found little support in the scientific community and played no role in the continuing development of modern physics. In 1856, Wilhelm Eduard Weber and Rudolf Kohlrausch measured the numerical value of the ratio of the electrostatic unit of charge to the electromagnetic unit of charge. They found that the ratio between the electrostatic unit of charge and the electromagnetic unit of charge is the speed of light. The following year, Gustav Kirchhoff wrote a paper in which he showed that the speed of a signal along an electric wire was equal to the speed of light. These are the first recorded historical links between the speed of light and electromagnetic phenomena. James Clerk Maxwell began working on Michael Faraday's lines of force. In his 1861 paper on physical lines of force, he modeled these magnetic lines of force using a sea of molecular vortices that he considered to be partly made of ether and partly made of ordinary matter. In 1887 to 1889, Heinrich Hertz experimentally demonstrated the electric magnetic waves are identical to light waves. This unification of electromagnetic wave and optics indicated that there was a single luminiferous ether instead of many different kinds of ether media. Maxwell wrote in Encyclopedia Britannica, ethers were invented for the planets to swim in, to constitute electric atmospheres and magnetic effluvia, to convey sensations from one part of our bodies to another, and so on, until all space had been filled 3 or 4 times over with ethers. The only ether which has survived is that which was invented by Huygens to explain the propagation of light. By the early 20th century, ether theory was in trouble. A series of increasingly complex experiments had been carried out in the late 19th century to try to detect the motion of the Earth through the ether, and had failed to do so. Ether fell to Occam's razor. In philosophy, Occam's razor, also spelled Occam's razor or Occam's razor, Latin, novacula Occami, is the problem-solving principle that recommends searching for explanations constructed with the smallest possible set of elements. It is also known as the principle of parsimony or the law of parsimony. Popularly, the principle is sometimes paraphrased as the simplest explanation is usually the best one. Ernst Mach formulated the stronger version of Occam's razor into physics, which he called the principle of economy, stating, "Scientists must use the simplest means of arriving at their results and exclude everything not perceived by the senses." This principle goes back at least as far as Aristotle, who wrote nature operates in the shortest way possible. Ether theory was dealt another blow when the Galilean transformation and Newtonian dynamics were both modified by Albert Einstein's special theory of relativity, giving the mathematics of Lorentzian electrodynamics a new, non-ether context. Unlike most major shifts in scientific thought, special relativity was adopted by the scientific community remarkably quickly. Max Planck's early advocacy of the special theory, along with the elegant formulation given to it by Hermann Minkowski, contributed much to the rapid acceptance of special relativity among working scientists. When Einstein was still a student in the Zurich Polytechnic in 1900, he was very interested in the idea of ether. His initial proposal of research thesis was to do an experiment to measure how fast the Earth was moving through the ether. The velocity of a wave is proportional to the square root of the elastic forces which cause its propagation, and inversely proportional to the mass of the ether moved by these forces. In another paper of 1924, named Concerning the Ether, Einstein argued that Newton's absolute space, in which acceleration is absolute, is the ether of mechanics. And within the electromagnetic theory of Maxwell and Lorentz, one can speak of the ether of electrodynamics, in which the ether possesses an absolute state of motion. With the development of the special theory of relativity, the need to account for a single universal frame of reference had disappeared, and acceptance of the 19th century theory of a luminiferous ether disappeared with it. For Einstein, the Lorentz transformation implied a conceptual change, that the concept of position in space or time was not absolute, but could differ depending on the observer's location and velocity. Moreover, in another paper published the same month in 1905, Einstein made several observations on a then thorny problem, the photoelectric effect. In this work, he demonstrated that light could be considered as particles that have a wave-like nature. Particles obviously do not need a medium to travel, and thus, neither did light. This was the first step that would lead to the full development of quantum mechanics, in which the wave-like nature and the particle-like nature of light are both considered as valid descriptions of light. In 1920, Einstein gave an address at Leiden University in which he commented, "More careful reflection teaches us, however, that the special theory of relativity does not compel us to deny ether. We may assume the existence of an ether, only we must give up ascribing a definite state of motion to it, i.e., we must by abstraction take from it the last mechanical characteristic which Lorentz had still left it. We shall see later that this point of view, the conceivability of which I shall at once endeavor to make more intelligible by a somewhat halting comparison, is justified by the results of the general theory of relativity." He concluded his address by saying that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable. Einstein's theory, along with more recent modern experiments, show that space is not an empty vacuum filled with nothingness, but rather spaces filled with a transparent substance with a structure comparable to solids, liquids, and gases. Quantum mechanics can be used to describe spacetime as being non-empty at extremely small scales, fluctuating and generating particle pairs that appear and disappear incredibly quickly. It has been suggested by some, such as Paul Dirac, that this quantum vacuum may be the equivalent in modern physics of a particulate ether. However, Dirac's ether hypothesis was motivated by his dissatisfaction with quantum electrodynamics, and it never gained support from the mainstream scientific community. Physicist Robert B. Laughlin wrote, "It is ironic that Einstein's most creative work, the general theory of relativity, should boil down to conceptualizing space as a medium when his original premise, in special relativity, was that no such medium existed." The word ether has extremely negative connotations in theoretical physics because of its past association with opposition to relativity. This is unfortunate because, stripped of these connotations, it rather nicely captures the way most physicists actually think about the vacuum. Relativity actually says nothing about the existence or non-existence of matter pervading the universe, only that any such matter must have relativistic symmetry. It turns out that such matter exists. About the time relativity was becoming accepted, studies of radioactivity began showing that the empty vacuum of space had spectroscopic structures similar to that of ordinary quantum solids and fluids. Subsequent studies with large particle accelerators have now led us to understand that space is more like a piece of window glass than ideal Newtonian emptiness. It is filled with stuff that is normally transparent but can be made visible by hitting it sufficiently hard to knock out a part. The modern concept of the vacuum of space, confirmed every day by experiment, is relativistic ether. But we do not call it this because it is not accepted, taboo. Louis de Broglie stated, "Any particle, ever isolated, has to be imagined as in continuous energetic contact with a hidden medium." However, as de Broglie pointed out, this medium could not serve as a universal reference medium, as this would be contrary to relativity theory. In addition to the scientific evidence that supports the existence of relativistic ether permeating space, other modern scientific concepts that are reminiscent of ancient ether concepts are string theory, the Higgs field, dark energy, and the grand unified theory of everything. While all of these advanced, modern scientific theories include the idea of an all-pervading substance or material in the universe, similar to the ancient and classical concepts of ether. Empirical evidence of ether can be obtained by simply observing evidence in nature and comparing the observations to the qualities, characteristics, and definitions attributed to ether from antiquity, from the ancient and classical definitions of ether. There are basically 9 attributes consistently associated with ether. The 9 attributes of ether from ancient sciences are: 1. Ether permeates all of nature, the universe, and existence. 2. Ether is primordial, essential, and fundamental. 3. Ether exists in outer space with the sky and heavens. 4. Ether exists within the upper air and atmosphere. 5. Ether is related to breath and breathing. 6. Ether is needed for life. 7. Ether can incinerate and burn. 8. Ether is related to light. Ether is associated with energy. In modern physics, the most common form of matter in the universe is plasma. Plasma is a state of matter, which results from the ionization of gas. Ionization occurs when the number of electrons in an atom does not equal the number of protons in an atom. Contrary to popular belief, outer space is not a completely empty void vacuum, but rather filled with plasma, gas, electromagnetic radiation, and neutrinos. The electrons that ionize gas and form plasma are fundamental particles in nature and also used to form matter. The electromagnetic radiation that permeates outer space is a fundamental force in nature and motivates the movement of matter. Considering that plasma, electrons, neutrinos, and electromagnetic radiation permeate all of nature and the universe, and then these concepts can be considered analogous to ether. As previously stated, outer space is not a completely void vacuum, but rather fueled with plasma, gas, electromagnetic radiation, and neutrinos. What makes outer space a vacuum is that the pressure in outer space is much less than the atmospheric pressure on Earth. However, the plasma gas and electromagnetic radiation from outer space also exist within the heavens, sky, and atmosphere on Earth. The plasma and gas that fills outer space can combine to form stars and solar systems, as we have shown on previous webisodes. The nebula hypothesis in modern science states that the solar system started as a molecular cloud of interstellar gas filled with particles of all the existing gases and elements in nature, which is referred to as 9 ether by the author Dr. Malachi Zork back in the 1990s. When these molecular clouds of gas collapsed, they formed nebulas and protoplanetary disks, which eventually become stars, planets, and solar systems. The Orion Nebula is a well-known example of a nebula that is the combination of all existing gases in nature and is considered a star nursery, thus considering that plasma gas, electromagnetic radiation, and neutrinos fill out space, the sky, and heaven, then these modern scientific concepts can be considered analogous to the ancient concept of ether. In the 3 main modern monotheistic religions, namely Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the upper air, or upper atmosphere, is synonymous with heaven, thus the etheric realm, or astral plane of the upper atmosphere, is analogous to the concepts of the kingdom of heaven, paradise, and Jannah found in the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In many ancient cultures, the various deities that were used to personify the concepts of ether were often associated with birds because birds were able to fly into the upper atmosphere, or ether. Birds are able to travel to altitudes higher in the ethers than any other mammals because of a bird's ability to extract large amounts of oxygen from the air. One of the most famous ancient deities related to ether and was represented by a bird was the sun god Re or Heru, who was depicted as a hawk or falcon. Another important bird deity from ancient Tamarean culture is the phoenix, also known as the Bennu bird in Egypt. The Bennu bird was considered the soul of the sun god Re and the light at the apex of the pyramid. The Bennu bird was equivalent to the phoenix bird that would destroy itself in flames every 1,000 years by burning itself and its nest to ashes only to rise from the ashes reborn and resurrected. The ability to travel into the ethers or upper atmosphere is why angels in religious traditions are often depicted with wings. It has been established that ether exists within the atmosphere of the air we breathe. Thus, ether also enters our bodies through breathing. This breathing or respiration process within our body breaks down the air we breathe to deliver energy to our bodies and brains. There's also a religious relationship between breath and spirit and soul. The etymological and original meaning of the word spirit is to breathe or blow. In the three main monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the Hebrew word, translated as spirit, in the Old Testament of the Bible, is ruach, Strong's H7307, which means breath, wind, or air. The Hebrew word ruach also relates to the Arabic word ruh, which means spirit and is used as an attribute of the angel Gabriel in Islam as al-Ruh al-Quds, which means the Holy Spirit in Arabic. In the New Testament of the Bible, the word translated as spirit is pneuma, Strong's G1451, meaning breath. In Greek, the Hebrew word translated soul in the Old Testament of the Bible as nephesh, Strong's H5315, coming from the root word naphesh, Strong's H5314, meaning to take a breath. Since we comprehend that ether is related to gas, air, and breathing, and all of the original meanings of the word spirit and soul meant breathing or air, then we must also conclude that ether is related to spirit and soul. Ether is also related to the concepts of spirit and soul found in other religious traditions besides Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Hebrew word nephesh, meaning to take a breath, is also related to the Akkadian word napa, meaning blowpipe, and the ancient Egyptian word nephew, meaning wind, air, and breath. The ancient Egyptians divided ether that entered into one's body using various aspects, which together made a human soul, including the akh, meaning to shine or radiate light, the energetic ether within the body. The ba, being the mentality or personality, sikkim as the vital power, spark of life, and the ka, meaning breath of life, vital essence. The ka from ancient Egypt is also similar to the concept of ki, or chi from Chinese philosophy, meaning gas, breath of life consciousness, vital energy, and life force. In Chinese philosophy, it is said that the ether ki can be channeled through the palms for healing in a process called Reiki. The concept of ki in China is obviously similar to the concept of prana, meaning vital breath of life in Hindu philosophy. And all relate to air, breath, spirit, soul, and ether. Ether is needed for life in the form of the air we breathe. Also, our very consciousness and thoughts are made up of electromagnetic radiation ether, in addition to the breath of life and the material of our thoughts. Ether is the spiritual realm from religious traditions wherein spiritual or etheric beings such as jinn, angels, souls, and God dwell. In modern chemistry, the word ether is used to describe a highly flammable liquid that is used as fuel called diethyl ether. In biochemistry, ether bonds are found in carbohydrates. Diethyl ether and other flammable liquid mixtures of hydrocarbons are collectively called naphtha. The word naphtha shares the same etymological root as the words nephesh, nephesh, and nephew mentioned earlier. As mentioned earlier, ether is related to the state of matter called plasma, and flames are a state of matter classified as plasma. Thus, the flames of a fire are also related to ether. The presence of the energy element ether in any of the states of matter, solid, liquid, or gas, has the ability to create flammable solids, flammable liquids, and flammable gases. The ability of ether to incinerate and burn is why the Greeks called Africans by the name Ethiopian, literally meaning ether people or burn people, referring to the dark color of the melanin skin pigment. Africans, or Ether Utopians, are definitely a people of the sun, and that the source of the tones of melanin comes from being metaphorically burned by the sun. It is a known fact that a suntan can be achieved by exposure to ultraviolet radiation. Melanogenesis is the process by which melanin in the skin is produced. The processes of suntans, sunburn, and melanogenesis are virtually identical. However, suntans and sunburns do not affect a person's DNA and are caused by frequencies of ultra-radiation called UVA between the range of 750 THz to 940 THz. However, ultraviolet radiation called UVB between the frequencies of 940 THz to 1070 THz can affect a person's genetic DNA and causes melanogenesis. The melanin within the skin of the carbon organic African and Ether Utopian people is indeed a genetic DNA trait inherited from the sun. Since UVB ultraviolet rays are the fastest frequency of light that come to Earth from the sun, it is indeed a fact that the DNA of carbon organic tribes, families, and clans referred to as African, or Ether Utopians people, came from the fastest frequencies of light from the sun. So indeed, ether people have genes determined by the heat of the sun, or sun heat genes. Dark colors absorb more frequencies of visible light, thus the melanin that exists in African people with dark skin facilitates the absorption of light energy ether from the sun, just like the chlorophyll pigment in plants enables the photosynthesis of the sun's energy, and dark solar panels enable the production of solar energy. Moreover, melanin is an electrically conductive substance used to create solid-state, organic electronic devices. In an experiment conducted in the 1970s, scientists have shown that melanin can emit light in a process called electroluminescence. Just as the electron is the smallest fundamental particle to rise from the primordial abyss of antimatter, it is said in ancient African cosmology that Ta grows from the primordial abyss of none. Also, just as the movement of vibration of electrons can cause light, it is said in ancient and African cosmology that the speech or vibration from Ta gave birth to Adam or Adam Ray, who is symbolic of light. In the Memphis theology, Ta creates by way of symbolic contemplation and speech. Thus Ta is also representative of the mental faculties of the mind, consciousness, and reason. The relationship between thoughts, reason, electrons, and electricity is that thoughts and reason are actually electrons flowing within the brain. The very substance of your thoughts is electrons. If we consider that plasma is an ionized gas, and an ionized gas facilitates the flow of electrons, and conscience and conscious are composed of flowing electrons, then it is indeed possible that ionized gas, in the form of plasma ether, could be both conscience and conscious. Comprehending the fact that thoughts and reason are composed of the fundamental particle called the electron, and then we must also comprehend that relative to the ether of the mind, there are three creations. 1. The quantum sphere, the realm of electrons. 2. The noosphere, the realm of human and other biological thoughts, created by electrons. And 3. The cybersphere, which is the realm of computers and mechanical thoughts within machines, in general, created by brains, which were created by electrons. Therefore, it is no surprise that the ability of computers to network with one another through the flow of electrons and electromagnetic radiation has been termed an ether network, or an Ethernet. Ultraviolet rays, visible light, and infrared rays from the sun make contact with the Earth's atmosphere. UVC ultra-electromagnetic radiation is completely absorbed by the Earth atmosphere and does not make contact with the Earth's surface. UVB ultraviolet electromagnetic radiation is partially absorbed by the Earth atmosphere and only partly reaches to Earth's surface. People living on parts of the Earth, which receive UVB rays from the sun, have developed darker complexions to absorb these ultraviolet electromagnetic rays within the skin. Considering that electromagnetic radiation from the sun does not originate on Earth, but has genetically influenced some people living on Earth, we can consider people of the sun whose DNA and melanin has been affected by the sun empirical examples of extraterrestrial beings. Electromagnetic radiation from the sun also affects hair texture. The shape of the hair follicle determines the texture of a person's hair. A rounded hair follicle produces straight hair, and a more oval or slip-shaped hair follicle produces coiled hair. The shape of the hair follicle is determined by temperature of the person's genetic place of origin on the planet and the exposure of electromagnetic radiation in the region. Hair color and hair texture is not unique to a person's race. Although most people of the same race have similar complexions and hair textures, there are people with very dark complexions with naturally straight hair. And there are very light complexions with naturally coiled hair. There are other people with very dark complexions but have naturally light hair, and people with very light complexions that have naturally dark hair. It is the genetic exposure to electromagnetic radiation that determines a person's complexion and hair texture. Just as the sun emits electromagnetic radiation in the form of sunlight to the Earth, the stars throughout the universe also emit electromagnetic radiation in the form of starlight. Just as the plants and people of Earth absorb sunlight, the plants and people of Earth also absorb starlight. Therefore, there are people of the sun and there are also people of the stars. In fact, our sun is a star. Electromagnetic radiation in the form of sunlight and starlight determine characteristics of our genetics through absorption by our bodies and indirectly through absorption by the vegetables and fruits we eat. We will cover this much more in depth within our next webisode, Melanin, the universal gift from the gods, and the upcoming webisode entitled The Solar Biological Priesthoods and the Alchemists of Ancient Kemet. For further in-depth information on the subject of ether discussed in this webisode, seek out the books issued by African Creative Energy at www.africancreationenergy.com. Before we conclude, let's refer to the author Dr. Malachi Zork. Dr. Zork revived the use of the term ether amongst carbon organic tribes, families, and clans across the Western Hemisphere in the early 1990s. Many claimed he was crazy, yet the video makes it clear that the concept of ether is scientific fact, as we have shown throughout this webisode. But how does it correlate with you, the carbon-abundant organic being? We will begin with an excerpt taken from the Sun Cycle scripture referred to as the Holy Tablets, where Dr. Zork explains the importance of understanding ether and its manifestation in the body and health, especially in regard to how we started this webisode by exploring the spiritual understanding of ether from cultures spanning the globe. The law of attraction dominates the plane of force, which is a plane of existence we will explore when we come to clear up the misconception of planes, especially amongst those within the sphere of the flat earth doctrine. Upon the plane of force, there is neither distance nor time, there is no heat or cold, summer or winter, day or shadow hour. It is a plane of aspiring desires, spiritual, as well as carnal, physical. The physical plane consists of dense chemical regions of solids, liquids, and gases, and the etheric region consists of the four higher physical ethers, being ultra-gaseous matter, life force ether, light ether, and mental ether formed on the higher planes, which step down to become the intuition of the human being, and the intuition of the human being stepped down to become consciousness, which became his character, his living soul. The ultra-gaseous matter, ether, is the densest and the lowest of all the four ethers of the physical plane. The ultra-gaseous matter ether is the channel for all the physical forces with which you are familiar with, like heat, sound, light, motion, ultraviolet rays, and cosmic rays. This ether subplane of the physical manifests aspects, which operate in human beings under the direction of the conscious mind. Within the physical form, the ultra-gaseous matter, known as ether, is operating under the law of attraction, and it draws the physical form from the needed elements to the surrounding space, and it makes them absorb to be utilized in the physical form. The ultra-gaseous matter, ether, under the law of repulsion, expels from the physical form all the materials that are no longer useful to its maintenance. This is all accomplished under the direction of the subconscious mind. Life force ether is the source of all vitality and life for all forms of the mental plane, and the mental plane is interwoven into the spiritual plane, which is interwoven into the plane of force, which is interwoven like a helix into the physical. It is a manifestation of your reproductive organs and all your seed after you. It operates in the female part of you, and in all of her functions of reproduction, and from the moment of conception, the life force ether attracts the elements around her, which enables the growth of the new body in her being. This life force ether also manifests activity in producing semen in the male. The spark of life, be it male or female, comes from your genetic likeness of your terrestrial descendants, and the various beings who descended from above, linking you back to the Most High and the source of the all being all. The light ether is the tunnel from which light from the plane of force penetrates, spreads, and intermingles within the physical plane. The light blinds human beings' emotional nature, which is the emotional center in its physical form, which is located in the solar plexus. The solar plexus is 6.5 to 7 inches above the navel or umbilical seat. The emotional center superimposes the solar plexus area. The lobe of the light ether is always in perpetual motion. The mental ether forms a bridge between the brain structure of the physical form and the mental body of the physical individual. The mental ether is distributed across the brain centers and the cerebrospinal nervous system, which produces mental waves throughout the atmosphere. It is by these mental waves that your thought processes function, and it is because of this mental ether that thought forms are seen, which is the true light reflecting your every thought. The mental ether is a channel for the transmission of thoughts from one individual to another, a form called telepathy or teletarite, which will become increasingly responsive in these last days. In the physical form, the heart is the great center station of life's activities. When the heart fails to pulsate, the body is dead. The bloodstream carries life throughout the channels of the body, being sent there, not alone, but by the pumping action of the heart, and also by the law of magnetic attraction. The physical form gives off energy from itself, as well as attracts energies into itself from the marrow of the bones, which flow the ultra-gaseous matter ether. We will clarify why this is in our next webisode entitled Melanin, a Universal Gift of the Gods. It is registered as a pale, silvery myth throughout the physical form with its concentrated points of activity around all the vital organs. Its principal seat of activity is at the highest point of the right auricle of the heart. The physical body, when one dies, recycles from the ground in which it is planted, and it becomes life again. It penetrates into the atmosphere as films or dust particles, and they are breathed into the nostrils of human beings, where they are recycled by triggering nerves in the sinus cavity beneath the pyramid nose that works like a kidney to sift out the unneeded particles. And that related the chemical composure of that which is needed into the mother's bloodstream, and the human flesh is reanimated. This is the process by which a child is given former flesh in the mother's womb. Then there is the etheric double during the process of birth, where the atoms of the new forming, physical form, stick fast to the atoms of the etheric form. The physical form without the vital etheric form interpenetrating it is only an empty shell that possesses no vital life. The etheric form, after rising out of the physical form at death, is also an empty shell, and it disintegrates. It requires the two of them to express life. The etheric body is an interlacing network of etheric wires, which are knitted and concentrated at all seats along the spine. The principal point of contact is the navel or umbilical seat of light. From there, it extends into the spleen by the nerve ganglia from the umbilical seat of all human beings, where desires arise, and this is the emotional center, a principal station of the subconscious mind in human beings, where it operates under the influence of the pituitary gland, or the seat of light, or the third eye at the tip of the nasal pyramid, the brow, seat of Haru, the sun. The eye is at the cornerstone of your own pyramid. The ultra-gaseous matter, ether, in the physical form, is associated with the solids of the body, such as the structure of the body. The life force ether, which is etheric form, is involved in the fluids of the body called liquid ether, such as the bloodstream and the excretions of the ovaries and the testes. The spirit is in the blood. The blood is liquid. The spirit acts as a spark that ignites the life in the blood. The life produces a light, which appears as an auritic shell. It enhouses the soul, which is the light messenger. This messenger transports information to the conscious and subconscious being. The sparks of life trigger the mind that pulls itself from the mental reservoir of intellect, which is governed by the oversoul, but is connected by an etheric cord. All messages in light forms travel through the cords from the mental reservoir. Etherians, whom are the etheric parents of the carbon organic tribes, families, and clans of Mother Earth, are the guardians of this reservoir of intellect called Akasha. Each being receives light messages in their DNAs and RNAs from and through these beings that are responsible for triggering each moment of thought and action in their existence. So a harmonious flow of energy and life in the form of light messages must travel to the being, rendering each being's inner self etheric. The law of health will be based on this fact. The force centers of the spiritual form lie upon and thoroughly penetrate the glands of the physical form and draw in the solar energy and life force of the atmosphere, and put them into the physical form by their counterparts, which are the physical glands. These force centers, or seats of light, are the sockets into which the glands are plugged in order for the life force to flow into the physical form from the unlit world to the lit world. When your body becomes ill, what has happened is, the physical and the spiritual forms have somehow become disconnected. The physical is cut off from the source of life force, some connecting wires between the two have either severed or damaged, and your inner light dulls, your body begins filling with darkness. The cells starve for the life force, vitality, energy, and slowly die if the connection is not repaired. The great healing force, which operates under the direction of the subconscious mind, is available to everyone. It is a green light. The secret is to understand how to direct this life force to release tension within. This is to stimulate its vibrations, to bring all the cells of your physical form into harmony, one with the other. Through the mind power and focusing with full intensity upon the inner world and upon the acceleration and direction of the inner forces and the visualization of the presence of the green light and affirmations of the power of its presence and stimulating it through focalizing the thought force. This is the tremendous life energy within and surrounding the physical form. Through this focalized mind power, the green light forces act like a magnet, stimulated within. It begins immediately to attract from the swirling sea of ethers around us the sweeping current of green light which is awaiting to be drawn into any reservoir of life force. From the realm of darkness, the mental to the spiritual, to the plane of force, the seat of the green energy, thus, when it is stimulated, the physical form becomes an electromagnetic force field surging with increased power, and it draws more and more potent currents into itself from the surrounding ethers. Every molecule, every atom which builds up the cells of the physical body is built around the minute center of light, which is the spiritual force moving onto the plane of force, the life seat. It is this infinite, small light that is divine in aspect, the life of light from the Most High, the highest, which is the secret power that holds together the atom and the molecule that manifests from the plane of force to the physical plane. It is the center of the molecular solar system. The atom is nothing more than a tiny solar system charged with electric and magnetic power. If the atmosphere around you is completely charged with positive vitality, and the currents of life force are of joy and happiness, it is from the Most High within all. We thank you for enduring with us as we aim to make sure you have a thorough understanding of ether, and in our next webisode we will link the ether with melanin and the first members of humanity, being the carbon organic woolly hair tribes, families, and clans referred to today as blacks. And also make sure to subscribe to the Archive of Nations to get further notifications in the series, or check out our other related series designed to challenge the lies and misinformation promoted by the jurisdiction of Western academia. Peace.